It is a well-known fact that the herald staff, the caduceus, was one of many mythic emblems derived from the axis mundi. This connection between heaven and earth provided the hero, whether a messenger of the gods or a seer, to communicate the will of the gods living in the heavenly realm. The axis mundi is a universal mythic motif, briefly described as the cosmic axis spanning heaven and earth. It was located at Earth's North Pole. The axis mundi was visible to ancient man and was variously described and portrayed. While the caduceus was derived from the axis mundi, so were the sacred trees. Tree and staff came from the same archetype, the cosmic axis. So too did the serpents, which we will address shortly. Coming from the same archetype, all three share similar attributes. As we have repeatedly noted before, the archetype of the axis mundi proceeded from a very real physical source, the polar configuration. The polar configuration is a modern name for the ancient congregation of planets situated along Earth's north axis: Earth, Mars, Venus, and Saturn. From the point of view of the ancient earthbound observer, the planetary arrangement took many forms, hence the numerous variations of the axis mundi. For the purposes of this discussion, we will focus on those forms from which the tree and staff were derived. One of the most common motifs is that of the world mountain. The mountain in this recreation is the red pyramidal form extending downward from Mars toward the Earth. The mountain was often considered twin-peaked due to the intersection with the glowing crescent on Saturn. In biblical terms, this was Mount Zion and Mount Ararat. At times, the form below Mars narrowed, taking the form of a column, or for our purposes here, the trunk of the world tree. The plasma streamers extending from Venus formed the branches of the tree. This was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. This form is also the basis for the sacred oak at the Oracle of Dodona and the trees of the sun and moon consulted by Alexander the Great. The twin peaks of the world mountain combined with the world nail form the basis for the forked or circle staff of god and hero alike. The most common form of the caduceus was a staff entwined by one or two snakes. The serpentine staff originated from the same celestial form as the other forms of the staff, the axis mundi. The axis mundi, whatever form it took, was a giant Birkeland current extending between the red planet and Earth. Birkeland currents often give the appearance of a filamentary, twisted rope structure. The twisted filaments of the electrical discharge gave the appearance of a giant serpent or two serpents coiled around the axis mundi. The staff or rod used for divination often carried markings. Chiromancy in particular used marked lots. The marking of the staff is yet another byproduct of the underlying archetype. The markings of the rod, whether letter or number or magical symbol, were an inherent part of the structure of the polar configuration. Writing systems of all types originated in the heavens. Jewish lore provides the Hebrew version of the invention of the alphabet. Aaron's rod had the initials of the Hebrew names of the 10 plagues. Ancient writing systems were simply pictographs, representations of the endless forms of the polar configuration. From an iconographic or symbolic point of view, the very elements of the planetary configuration that form the basis of the herald staff, the caduceus, were the same elements that formed its markings. The staff and its markings were one and the same. These same principles held true for the Liahona, the spherical divination device specially prepared by the Lord to give Lehi and his family direction and occasional prophecy, was modeled after the polar configuration. The celestial form of the ball was the circular enclosure surrounding the planets, while the 4 plasma streamers formed the arrows of the director. The writings found by Lehi on the Liahona parallel the markings on the staff, both sets proceeding from the various subelements of the planetary configuration. The planetary archetypes also explain the presence of talking trees and staffs in the mythologies of the ancient world and their use in divination. The pillar of the axis mundi formed both the trunk of the sacred world tree and the shaft of the herald staff. This same column, as we have demonstrated earlier, was also the tongue of angels. It was this tongue that literally spoke to ancient mankind. The staff and tree were the tongue, and all 3 produced articulate speech in ancient times.